Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Joining me as always on Thursdays, the master of the universe, HUGHNIVERSE.com, the troll-free web surfing experience for Hugh Hewitt fans, the Generalissimo, the producer extraordinaire, not just of the Hugh Hewitt Show, but apparently now he's also claiming to be the producer extraordinaire of HotAir.com, Duane Patterson. Duane, you know, I don't know that we can actually give you the title, brother, but thanks for the tips over the last 3 weeks.
Oh, hey, you know, if I'm sitting there and I'm basically setting off the day so that I'm providing the tip and the material for the first Ed Morrissey post of the day on Hot Air, you know, Ed Morrissey, of course, being the principal contributor of HotAir.com, I think that makes me, by definition, it adds to my portfolio. I'm the principal producer of HotAir.com. I think everybody knows this.
Well, I am going to issue a no comment other than to say that we're all just one big Salem brotherhood here. And we certainly appreciate the fact that you've pointed out some really great stories. And today, of course, wasn't the first one because I was working on another story that we're going to talk about here.
As we're taping this, it's above the fold, as they say.
It is above the fold, and it is getting plenty of attention. George Gascon's decarceration policies allowed a known gang member with a long rap sheet to get a that would have been in jail. Should have been in prison for at least 32 months. Instead, they cut a deal and let him out on probation, despite the fact that it was his second felony with a firearm. And he conducted an ambush of 2 El Monte police officers, murdering both of them before getting shot and killed by police himself. You know, this is entirely on Gascon.
And there's been no comment by Gascon on
No, there has been a comment. I mean,
not a mea culpa.
Well, no, of course not. He says, the comment was, well, this was handled consistent with other cases in
right,
our office.
They all suck.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is the reason why he's facing a recall. And it's worth pointing out, too, as you and I talked about a little bit last night, in the show prep for the podcast, that Gascon just got read out by the appellate court a week prior to this, for doing the same damn thing, for ignoring 3 strikes laws, for ignoring sentencing enhancements because of his desire to pursue a decarceration policy, which is really legislative rather than executive in nature, and flat out ignoring the law. And that the reason why it was in the appellate court to begin with is because the union that represents his prosecutors took him to court to force him to start following the law.
His own people.
His own people. Yeah. The people who are left. Because a lot of them resigned already.
Yeah. Look, and it's not just prosecutors that are leaving. Angelenos, even Angelenos that are here illegally, have left the state for a safer climate. And I mean safer, like less crime.
Right.
The safer crime element of Baja California, Mexico. 280,000 people that used to reside in Los Angeles illegally have decided that crime's a little rough here. It's not safe to live here anymore. I can make my illegal money working from home in Cabo or working in Ensenada somewhere.
Yeah. That's astounding for me as a native Angelino to hear that Baja California is safer than Los Angeles County.
Deemed it and perceived to be safer than LA. Because of crap like what Gascon is perpetrating on the city. I mean,
for those of you who Baja, I mean, Tijuana is crime infested, right?
Yes.
Baja, they were kidnapping Americans down in some places in Baja California not all that long ago. I mean, it really has been. It didn't always used to be that way in Baja either. Baja used to be fairly tame once you got outside of Tijuana. Anyway.
Yeah, until the cartels took over.
Right, until the cartels took over, it was actually, once you got south of Tijuana, it was a pretty nice place to go visit. But it hasn't been that way in a while, like a couple of decades at least.
Right.
And so the fact that Angelenos think it's safer on that side of the border really tells you a lot about how they're perceiving their own home turf.
We've become the third world excrement hole that we've accused other places of being.
Yes, and it's because of people like Chesa Boudin in San Francisco and George Gascon in Los Angeles,
right,
who are trying to pursue policies that really should be enacted through legislatures. I mean, they're bad policies anyway, but if you're going to pursue that, what you need to do is you need to change the law to reflect that, not simply refuse to enforce the law when you're the law enforcement officer of the county.
Let's call it what it is. It's just it's legalizing anarchy is what it is.
It is. It's dereliction of duty is what it actually is. I mean, Chesa Boudin got the boot over it. George Gascon is about to as well because again, as we were mentioning last night, they have enough petitions now. At least technically speaking, they have enough petitions, assuming that they're all valid, to get the recall. They have enough petitions,
and as far as the motivation to get him out, he has 2 dead cops on his hands.
Yeah, in spades. They've got it in spades. And, they're still collecting signatures because they've got until July 6th to submit them. And right. I would imagine today they are lining up around the block to sign those petitions.
In Rosemead, in El Monte, in Cudahy, and all those communities.
All those places along the 605 corridor are
605 corridor up against the San Gabriel Valley.
Yeah, against the 60. Yeah, I mean, that's East Los Angeles is not going to be happy with that outcome. And I mean, East Los Angeles is a tough area. It's a high crime area. And while certainly that area has issues with policing, some parts of policing, they don't want to live in a high crime area either. They want an effective police force, and they want people prosecuted. Correct. And the idea that they're somehow happy about opening up the prisons, letting everybody out so they can run around and commit more crime in places like El Monte and Cudahy and Bell Gardens and all of those places along that 605, 60 corridor there is insane. Politically, it's insane. And it's the same type of thinking, by the way, which has led to the Democrats getting their ass kicked in the Rio Grande Valley this week in a special election in Texas's 34th congressional district.
Boy, are there Latino Democrats in neighboring districts that are hopping mad at the DCCC and the party. They feel kind of abandoned right now, don't they?
They do indeed. They do indeed, and for good reason. Because they are abandoned.
They are abandoned, yes.
and Henry Cuellar and Vicente Gonzalez, among others, have been trying to, light the fires, right? I mean, it's almost like, they've lit the fires to alert Rohan of the danger in Gondor, and Rohan's going, no, I'm sorry, it's just not politically correct to oppose, we should let Mordor be Mordor.
Now,
it's a Mordor crisis. They're going, it's a Mordor crisis. It's a Mordor crisis. And the DCCC is saying, what we really need to do is have outreach to Mordor.
Yeah, exactly. Now, to everybody that, shares my view that would be really nice to finish that border wall on the southern border to keep the drugs out and stem the human trafficking and all that stuff. If you want to get that border wall actually built, when that's going to get done? That's going to get done in about 2025 after the 24 presidential election. Hispanics go for the Republican nominee 60-40. Then you're going to see Democrats say, let's build that wall.
Yeah. They may say it in January 2023 after they get their asses kicked in the midterms. But
they're going to do.
Which they're going to do. I mean, and part of the reason is the fact that they are that Hispanic voters have gotten sick and tired of Democrats and their obsession with woke politics. I mean, and it goes beyond the border. And Tom Emmer talked to Politico about this too. Politico had a long article about this morning about how furious Latino Democrats are, and they're furious because they felt that the DCCC didn't help out in Texas 34, and the excuse that Sean Patrick Maloney, who's got his own problems at the moment, gave them was, well, that district is going away. Which is true. It's going away. I mean, Flores wanted a district that will disappear in redistricting after this session of Congress. So she's actually now going to run against Vicente Gonzalez in Texas 15, which is right next door to this, right? And he's going to have to face, Mayra Flores in an election in November, while she's got this momentum, while she is the youthful female Latino spokesperson for Republicans in the Rio Grande Valley. This is not a district that is terrible. I mean, even though it's only Vicente Gonzalez's district. I don't know what the reconfigured district is going to be, but Vicente Gonzalez's district is only D+3. Texas 34 was only D+5. It's going to be at least 80% Hispanic, and the Hispanics are sick and tired of Democrats. If I was Vicente Gonzalez, I'd be starting to send my resume around to the different think tanks, especially ones that might, slap some Democrats across the face and tell them to wake up. This is not an issue of spending money in Texas 34. This is an issue of Democrats resolutely refusing to deal with the issues that actually matter to voters, especially in the RGV, which is border crisis, inflation, gas prices, and crime. Those are the 6 issues. The first 3 are border crisis, and the other ones,
yes.
None of the other ones, by the way, are there should be a drag queen in every school.
Yes, that's spectacular too, especially when we are in a debate after the school shooting about whether we harden schools or not. Hardening schools is not putting a drag queen up there with bolt-ons, right? That's not exactly what we had in mind for hardening up a school. Our friend Sean Trendy over at Real Clear Politics did a piece on this movement of Latino voting blocks towards Republicans by the 10, 15, 20, 30 point range in some cases. And I saw online on Twitter a couple of days ago, somebody called Obama's portrait. It was a lefty person responds to Trendy saying, "Well, why are Latinx voters turning red?" ? And our friend David Burge, Iowa Hawk, says, "Well, perhaps the answer is right there in your own question. Maybe not referring to them as Latinx voters because Hispanics don't like that much."
No, they don't. No, I think it's 3%. 3%
that shows you're not resonating with the concerns that they actually really have.
Yeah, no, this is it's a nonsense approach. This is a fantasy approach. Democrats have constructed this elaborate fantasy, and they're about to have that fantasy completely destroyed in the midterm elections. I'm not even sure it'll wake them up to it, though. And the fantasy is that their immutable characteristic priority politics is somehow going to lead to greater cohesion. It's not. It's demolishing the party.
It's delusion.
It's an absolute delusion. It's a delusion. What matters to voters isn't divvying things up on the basis of immutable characteristics. That only matters in faculty lounges and progressive salons that can be found usually in Washington, D.C. What matters to voters is crime, inflation, gas prices, and if you're in the Rio Grande, and if you're in the Rio Grande Valley, border crisis. I mean, that's what matters to voters. And that was what the election showed on Tuesday. It's what the election's going to show in the midterms as well. And Henry Cuellar is another guy who's been ringing this bell, and his district parallels Vicente Gonzalez's. I mean, all these are right in the Rio Grande Valley, right on the border. These are the guys who know, and nobody's listening to them.
Right, because what they're being forced to campaign on, or what the national party is trying to give them support over, is drag queens and January 6th and just nonsense, right?
Yep.
And gun seizure. You think seizing guns is a real winning message when people are flooding across the border right now? with drugs and
well,
human
no,
trafficking?
but I mean, we can take this right back to Gascon too. They're talking about passing all sorts of laws that will restrict gun ownership. Well, you've got district attorneys, progressive district attorneys, mind you, who won't enforce the laws that they already have on the books to deal with gun violence. I mean, This guy should have been in prison on the day he conducted that ambush
for a gun felon.
He was a felon in possession of a gun. That's an automatic prison sentence in California. It was a second strike on him, and Gascon let him off. Gascon and his office let him off on probation. And now you have 2 dead police officers as a result of that. Plus, he's dead too, for that matter. If he was in prison, he'd probably still be alive. So,
well, that's the thing, is if he would have survived this standoff and he would have lived to see the day, you think Gascon would have put him away for 20 long for killing the cops or gone for life? I don't think he would have.
Well, I think he wouldn't have had any choice. In California, the premeditated murder or even murder in commission of a felony is automatically life without parole.
It should be, but it would not surprise me if Gascon were to have stayed long term. They would have knocked it down at some point and let him out.
Yeah, possibly. And certainly they wouldn't. I mean, they would have. Gascon was telling his prosecutors not to show up for parole hearings to argue against parole releases too. It's another point that the prosecutors union. I didn't even realize that the prosecutors had a union until Gascon showed up, and now they actually need one. That's another reason why they were suing Gascon to enforce the law.
They shouldn't be. The union shouldn't be a necessary thing.
No, it shouldn't be a necessary thing. I mean, I actually have no problem with people organizing. If that's what the majority of workers want to do in a workplace,
correct.
That's fine.
But
why is it necessary? Why is it necessary for professional attorneys to organize into a union? Well, we're finding out why in the Gascon era. Maybe it wasn't as necessary before, but it's certainly necessary now. So amazing. It's all right. Let's turn our attention. Let's turn our attention to energy policy because, oh, wait a minute. Before we do, though, on the basis of what's going on in South Texas and some other places, I understand that Hugh Hewitt has decided to branch out and he's now in the campaign ad production business. I'm assuming you're the producer extraordinaire for this, though.
Yes, he dropped this on me on the fly and said, boy, this is what we need to do. And so I just okay, threw it together.
That's very Hugh, by the way. That's very Hugh.
It's very Hugh. It turns out it's 50 seconds long. All that's
perfect.
This could run in every campaign ad from dog catcher up to senator for this 22 midterm cycle. All that's necessary is the 10-second disclaimer at the end. I'm Joe Bag of Donuts. And I approve this message, right? With the campaign website and the campaign number.
Yep.
That's the only thing that's necessary to tack on to the end of this cut.
I don't want to hear any more of these lies about reckless spending. We're changing people's lives.
And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House. Yeah!
I don't want to hear any more of these lies about reckless spending. We're changing people's lives.
I actually did vote for the $87 billion before I voted against it.
I don't want to hear any more of these lies about reckless spending. We're changing people's lives.
If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor, period. If you like your health care plan, you will be able to keep your health care plan, period.
I don't want to hear any more of these lies about reckless spending. We're changing people's lives.
I'm Adam Laxalt, and I approve that message.
I am Mayor Flores, and I approve that message. The only thing that you're missing there, by the way, because I'm a critic, so I have to criticize, is the inflation numbers. Yeah, I would have used the inflation numbers, or at least a clip of somebody talking about this being the worst inflation in 40 years.
I can do all that. But 2 of those were recent Democratic presidential contenders,
sure,
front runners, and 2 of them were actual Democratic presidents.
Yeah.
So that was the narrow field. I mean, and all of them were basically screaming at people or yelling at people, right?
Yep. Well, Obama wasn't really yelling.
Well, as close as he gets.
Yeah, Obama wasn't really much of a yeller, which was one of his better qualities, actually. And John Kerry's not much of a yeller either. He's just got that sort of snobby, flabby senatorial. Oh, I actually voted for the $87 billion before I voted against it.
Well, again, this was Hugh. He said, "I just wrote the ad," and he said, "Here's how it needs to be." And so I'm pulling video clips and throwing it all together. So anyway, that's what we did this morning.
Well, there you go. So that's what you did this morning. We have another video clip. I want to move to energy policy because it's a disaster. And even the White House, I think, has finally started to wake up to how big of a disaster they have created with their attempts to shut down oil production and oil refining in the United States. Now, this started on day one. Executive Order 13990 imposed all sorts of new obstacles and red tape to any sort of new or expanded
to fulfill
oil and
Joe
gas.
Biden's campaign promise that I'm going to end drilling.
I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to shut
it down. He's doing a better job at that than he did with the virus, because he promised to shut down the virus too. But he actually took steps on day one to shut down oil production.
Well, he shut down because you can as a president actually, or at least in concert with Congress, you can actually shut down oil production and oil refining and oil transmission and all those sorts of things. And every step he's taken up until now has been to do that. Now, Suddenly, though, Duane, you've got Biden's energy secretary saying that oil producers really need to step up production for a while. And John Berman at CNN,
of all places,
was like,
wait
what?
a minute. Why the hell would they do that?
Yeah, you've got that clip, I understand, right?
I do. Here we go.
5 years from now, 10 years from now, are you telling me you want them drilling for more oil? You want the refineries putting out more gasoline in 5 or 10 years?
What we're saying is today we need that supply increased. Of course, in 5 or 10 years, actually in the immediate, we are also pressing on the accelerator, if you will, to move toward clean energy so that we don't have to be under the thumb of petro-dictators like Putin or at the whim of the volatility of fossil fuels. Ultimately, America will be most secure when we can rely upon our own clean domestic production of energy.
But that's the problem
solar,
for these companies.
Wind,
these companies are saying, you're asking me to do more now, invest more now, when in fact, 5 or 10 years from now, we don't think that demand will be there. And the administration doesn't even necessarily want it to be there. Just one last question on Saudi Arabia.
So,
yeah. I mean,
he's got a point, doesn't he?
Well, he's got a great point. And it's not even 5 or 10 years. They already started trying to shut down drilling in the United States and trying to shut down refining in the United States. And they shut down the pipeline, the Keystone XL pipeline in the United States.
Look what happened 2 days ago. 2 days ago at USC's campus in Los Angeles, John Forbes Kerry, the climate czar, the guy that Joe Biden has allowed to infuse his climate witchery, his climate religion, that is now, because of a presidential decree, it infuses every agency and every policy has to run through the climate czar so that it fulfills the commitment to get us to a net zero whatever. John Kerry 2 nights ago was at a event at USC, and he actually said, no, we're not going to produce more oil and gas. That's the last thing we need to do.
Right.
No. Not even 12 hours later, the White House issues a letter to Big Oil, demanding Big Oil respond to them in writing with why the hell aren't you doing your patriotic duty? Why aren't you you're killing us here. We got to have more oil. And
you're killing us, Smalls.
You're killing me, Smalls. And Big Oil's looking at the White House going, dude, really?
Yeah, I mean, Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday says it's their patriotic duty. It's their patriotic duty to produce the stuff that we told them that we're going to shut down.
If big oil doesn't stop, cease immediately all this trying to plan ahead for the future and move to something that they can survive with, if they don't quit that right now and immediately go back and bail our ass out of a political nightmare that we got ourselves in, you're not being patriotic. And big oil's looking at them going, do I know you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm being a little bit lighthearted about this, but this actually has me very angry because this is a campaign of demagoguery that is based on lies that are so bald and yet still so ignored by the media. You know, I've been fact checking Joe Biden's claims on ExxonMobil profits, on, you know, for that matter, Marathon, BP. I've been doing this for almost a week now. I mean, you know how many media fact checkers have joined me in this effort? All it takes, by the way, is just to look at the quarterly reports. I mean, it's not like it's intense here.
Oh, I'm sure your friend Glenn Kessler's been all over this.
That's it, man. Those are the fact checkers.
You mean Glenn Kessler hasn't been on this one?
Well, not so far. I even tagged him on one of those. Just, you know, a friendly tag, not even a call out tag. I just tagged him on it. I wonder. Not so far.
Well, is he still worried about? Is he still worried about all the you know, the Joey baby stories and all the others? You know, we talked about gas prices going up around the kitchen table when I was growing up. Is he still on that stuff?
Yeah, he's still on that stuff. He still says that they're making more money than God, that they don't pay taxes, that their profits are going off the charts. And by the way, this is only the second dumbest set of claims coming out this week. The first dumbest set of claims coming out this week is Ron Wyden's attempt to impose a windfall profits tax on oil companies
of 21%.
Of 21%.
Thinking that won't raise the price at all. That will actually have the opposite effect.
It's going to discourage investment. Which means it's going to lower production, which means that prices are going to continue to go up.
Gas will be scarcer, as a commodity, which will drive up the price even more.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It's brilliant. That's the dumbest. That's the dumbest demagoguery this week.
Karine Jean-Pierre, why don't they just do their patriotic duty and lower prices? Just take one for the team and just lower the price.
Yes, it's idiotic.
Okay, what's going to happen? Let's say the collusion is there and all of big oil says, damn it, you're right. We're going to suck it up for the next 3 months, get over this hump together. We are going to, I don't care if oil is at $120 a barrel. We're going to price gasoline as though it were $60 a barrel. And we're just going to start charging $2.50 for gas. Let's say they did that. They're never going to, but let's say they did. What do you suppose is going to happen to gasoline in the United States if they were just magically to price it at $2.50?
It will disappear.
We will have gas lines.
We will have gas lines all over again. Because that's what happens. That's what happens with price caps. That's the problem with price caps.
And if that fantasy and delusion that the White House is calling for happened, if big oil did their patriotic duty and slashed the price of gas just arbitrarily, and we had the natural laws as much as the laws of gravity are in play, the physical laws of supply and demand would cause gas shortages miles long. And if that happened, you think the White House is going to say, well, it's not big oil's fault that we have these lines? No. Who's going to get the blame for it?
Oil companies.
Right. So why the hell would they ever even consider it?
They're not. They're not going to consider it because it's economic suicide. It's political suicide too. It's just that this White House is too stupid to understand that.
It's this White House is literally they're in the ocean. The icebergs are around them. The ship has already gone down, and this administration is Rose trying to hang on to the effing door.
Yep. No, this administration is Rose trying to hang on to the effing door while prying the consumers' cold dead hands off their wrists. and letting him sink to the bottom of the ocean.
Yes.
By the way, we're almost out of time, but it just reminds me that one of the funniest scenes in films was Jim Carrey's deconstruction of that in Bruce Almighty. Bruce Almighty, yes. Which was I mean, it's not a great film. It's a decent, it's a pretty decent film, but it's not a great film.
Under Niagara Falls.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm standing here with Katharine Hepburn's mom.
It's a great scene. It's a great scene. It was worth paying the ticket to get in the theater to see this. I think it's like 60 seconds of this deconstruction of
it. And you know that wasn't scripted. That was
no, of course not. That was totally Carey. That was totally Carey doing that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've come to the end of another great half hour in this podcast. What's coming up on tomorrow's Hugh Hewitt show?
We're actually starting a new series that we haven't done before with the Hillsdale Dialogue, which we're interested to see what the reaction is. Everybody knows Larry Arnn. Everybody knows the great work that Hillsdale does, right? Arnn comes on every week. It's summer in Hillsdale. Arnn is on his motorcycle going off who knows where. But what Hillsdale has provided, what they've done, is they actually took a lecture series of Larry Arnn conducting a class on Aristotle. That's one of his things. He's an Aristotle scholar, right?
Right.
So he took a graduate class of 10 to 12 students and actually conducted a course, and it was a 4-camera shoot. So it's a full professional shoot of basically working through an Aristotle course conducted by Larry Arnn. And they cut these things up into segments that we can use for air purposes, with Hugh doing all the raps in and out and all that stuff. But this is going to be the first time you can actually watch a Hillsdale course be taught by Larry Arnn for over the next 10 weeks.
Great.
An hour a week over the next 10 weeks. And it should be, I mean, I just pieced together the first one, and it's fascinating to watch Larry Arnn deal with a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-old kids and watching them think and watching them tweak with them to make them think.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to watch Larry Arnn actually practice the craft of being a professor, not just running a college. But so that's tomorrow. That's just me personally. I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Absolutely. No, that's great. It's coming up tomorrow at 6 a.m. Eastern time, right. 5 a.m. in God's time zone, 3 a.m. on the left coast. And Duane, you can watch that. You can watch that through the universe, where Duane is the master of the universe. You have to be a member of the universe, though, and if you're a member of the universe, you get the chance to do the after shows in the evenings with Duane. Duane's going to be
inflation has not hit, by the way. The universe, it's the same price as it was a year ago. Not much else in America is, but our universe is still the same price it always was.
Well, there you go. That's I'd like to chalk that up to firm resolve. I suspect that might be that nobody's actually thought to do anything about it, though. But that's okay. Either way, it's still the same price.
So get in now while you can.
Get in before Hugh actually takes a look at the price and goes, "What the hell?"
Get in now. Get in now before they tie it to the prime rate.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, Duane Generalissimo Patterson, thanks again for another blast here, and we'll talk to you again next week, sir.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right, stay tuned for more from the Ed Morrissey Show coming up right after this. This is Ed Morrissey of hotair.com for Town Hall. Joe Biden has labored mightily for the past year to blame everyone but himself for the rampant inflation plaguing America. In remarks last week, he blamed Vladimir Putin and corporate greed rather than Biden's own energy policies. But Biden flat out lied about ExxonMobil, which he said made more money than God. Biden scolded a reporter by asking him to report Exxon's profits for this quarter and finish Exxon start investing, start paying your taxes. In fact, a review of ExxonMobil's last quarterly report showed they paid a 32% rate on their taxable income for Q1 and spent almost $82 billion on costs and investments. Later, the Financial Times reported that Biden and his team were shocked to find out that capital investors were reluctant to invest in oil and gas production expansion. That is a direct result of Biden's demonizing of the American oil and gas sector for the last several years. The demagoguery is cheap for Biden. It costs the rest of us plenty. We're feeling it each time at the pump. I'm Ed Morrissey. Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. And you may wonder, how it is, where your money is going when you're at the retail, when you're at the either online retail or in-person retail. Is your money going to causes that maybe you don't necessarily agree with? There's a way to find that out, and it doesn't involve interrogating the poor clerk that's across the counter from you. You can find this out on your own by doing some really good research. And Rebecca Hatfield is the president of Second Vote, which is an organization, has a website up there for its users to find out where your money's going and how to shop your values. And Rebecca, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So, I would say 15, 20 years ago, people would not have necessarily thought that this was a necessity, right? Because there was much less politicization of ordinary everyday transactions. You didn't go to your butchers and say, what's your policy on Ukraine, for instance, or anything else like that, because it was just sort of assumed that politics was politics and commerce was commerce. But that's not the world. Yeah.
No, businesses were not engaged in politics back then like they are now.
Right. That was then, this is now. Everything's been politicized. And so a lot of times you find out that places where you spend your money, they're using that money to fund causes that are antithetical to your own beliefs.
Correct. Absolutely. And that's shocking to a lot of consumers. A lot of consumers are not aware. They've used certain retailers or certain services for years, and they've just, known them. They've been comfortable using them. They've been convenient. And I understand that. It's our culture. Our culture is centered around consumerism. We are consumers. And that's what we've been driven towards and marketed to, and that's what we've become accustomed to. So it's understandable.
Well, I mean, yes, and it's understandable, and I think I think people are now getting the idea that this is the world that we're living in, but I don't think that they feel like they've had really good tools to navigate that world, right? That's what Second Vote is. Secondvote.com, by the way, is where you can find 2nd vote.com. Second Vote is the URL where you find this. And it says, go beyond the ballot. Your first vote is at the ballot box. Your second vote is with your wallet. And join our efforts in exposing corporations and organizations that are funding leftist advocacy. But even if you're not necessarily up for a crusade, at least you have the tools now to determine where that money might be going. Right.
Well, and here's the thing. We don't promote any type of boycott. That's to me is very counterproductive. That's not going to work. That's been proven not to work. Our job is advocacy. We want to empower the consumers, give you the information, and let you decide what you want to do about the information. If you want to choose to make a change, that's your business. If you want to not make a change, that's your business. Our job is just to simply inform. And we score companies based on 6 fundamental issues: life, basic freedoms, Second Amendment, civil society, education, and environment. Now, of course, life is going to be our heavy-hitting issue. That's the one that we hold the highest regard, of course, because you cannot undo that deed. Once you give to a pro-abortion entity, once you make that donation or make that policy, that's not something that you can necessarily redeem yourself on. That's a very distinctive issue for us, and we weight that one very heavy. Whereas environment, we believe that we should be good stewards of what the Lord has given us in our creation, and that one is not as heavy of a weighted one. So we score on 6 issues. We give a composite score for free, and then if you subscribe, you get to see the individual scores. So our approach is more, let's come together, let's bring our voices together, because individually we don't sound very loud, but if we come together, go through secondvote.com, let's leave a comment. Let's send a message to those companies and say, hey, we don't like what you're doing. Because as in a capitalistic type environment, which I don't know if we're totally capitalistic, but capitalist system, we're going to presume that we are, okay? Because we're not totally socialism yet, but let's just presume. The consumers are the guardrails. And if the consumers don't speak up and say enough, stop, no more, then the woke corporations are going to continue to do whatever they want to do. So we have to come together and use our voices and our vote with a wallet, which we can do daily. That's something that you don't just do once every 4 years or once every 2 years. You get to do that every single day and make a difference. That is where we can come together by purchasing, and then also by sending letters out, sending emails, telling them we don't like this. We don't want you to do this. This is not in line with what we want to see. And like you said, years ago, businesses did what businesses do. And that's what we celebrate. The neutral companies that are just in business to do business.
Right. And I also want to make a can't I just eat my waffle reference. I'm going to get back to that in just a second. But first, let's...
I kind of like mind your nuggets. I want to tell Chick-fil-A. Mind your nuggets.
Mind your nuggets.
Mind your nuggets.
Well, I mean, so I'll finish the joke. I was just going to tease this, but Barack Obama, when he was running for president, when you're running for president, you're pretty much on all the time. And he was I think he was at a Waffle House, but he was having breakfast someplace, and reporters were bugging him about something, and I kind of felt bad for the guy, in a way. And he was like, "Can I just eat my waffle?" and the reason why I bring this up is because Waffle House actually gets a really good score. It's on the front page of this. It's one of the examples that you have on there. Waffle House gets a 4.14. We'll get to what that means, but you can tell it's good because it's in green.
Yes.
Some of the other scores are in red. That's bad. Just in case you were wondering, that's bad. And then there's sort of an amber, which is in between. But before we get to that, before we get to the scoring and all that, let's find out a little bit about you, Rebecca. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this.
Alrighty. Well, my background, I'm being Hatfield, like as in related to Devil Ants Hatfield and the Hatfield McCoys. I'm legit.
Oh yeah.
Like really.
I wondered.
Yes. It's funny because certain generations, when you say Hatfield and McCoy to you, and they're like, I don't know what that is, but our generation, we're familiar with that.
Yeah.
So my family's from West Virginia. My dad was a preacher, a Baptist preacher and missionary. And I grew up, helping my family in that effort. We actually lived for a while in the British Virgin Islands. And that was really nice.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So I'm married and have 7 children. Homeschooled them.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very blessed. In my professional career, I've done everything from retail management, accounting, sales, technology sales, consulting, that type of thing. I really loved my time with an organization that helped bring businesses together and networked together. I was an ambassador for that organization and loved the let's lift each other up, let's give and try to network together to, instead of competing against each other, let's see how we can help one another. And that really aligned with my values. I like to see the conservative movement, instead of stepping on one another to get where they want to get, I want to see the conservative movement. Let's lock arms. Let's move forward instead of vertical or horizontal. Let's go forward. Let's not compete. Let's actually come together and make a forward motion here. And that's my mission.
Well, and I think that this is a great way to do that, right? I mean, it's not confrontational. It's informative. And it's, as you say, I am also not a believer at all in boycotts. I think boycotts are almost entirely ineffective. They usually only demonstrate the impotence of the people who are calling for boycotts, which is also counterproductive to whatever mission that you're trying to fulfill. This is different. This is just allowing people to have more knowledge, to give them the knowledge that they should have when entering into commercial relationships, but then leaving the choice for them. I mean, it's really just an informational engagement that people have at secondvote.com. I'm going to keep saying that, 2ndvote.com. Secondvote.com is where you find this. And I should ask you, do you have an app or is it just on the website?
Right now, we just have the website. We are so close to launching our app. It's right there. We're just right there. But we will have an app. Absolutely. And the app is going to look sleek and beautiful. And I'm so excited to launch it. I'm just beaming with pride and I can't wait. And yes, we have wonderful products coming out. Can't talk about them yet, but stay tuned. We want to take our consumer product offering to a step further, and we also want to venture into the business offerings. We have a small business alliance that we're going to be working on, and that is going to help small businesses. We want to promote give local, shop local, love local, and grow local too. Naturally, those things will do that. We want to promote local small businesses because we believe those are things that are going to help this economy. We need those small businesses, and they're going to feel this economy, way more than the large companies. We know that.
Right.
So we've got to be, very loyal to our companies. What do you typically do? Not you, but consumers. What do they typically do when you want to give a Christmas or a birthday gift card? Where do you go? Do you go to your local merchants? Do you go to your coffee shops that are owned by people you see every day?
Not usually, no.
Yeah, not usually. No. And that a lot of it is because of the marketing strategies. They've been conditioning us. They put a lot of money into it, and that's understandable. We've got to rethink our thinking. What is this purchase going to do for my country? What is this purchase going to do for my values? What is this purchase, this one right here? And every purchase, you can't necessarily always have that, whole theological or whole political, rundown. Sometimes you just have to do the best you can.
Right.
If you're, 12 o'clock at night, your child has a fever, Walgreens is the only thing open, go get your child the Tylenol or whatever.
Right,
yes. I understand that, but each one needs to be, let's break this down. Do I really have to go to Target? I'm not going to cast shame. I'm not going to, but what they're openly doing right now is just so abhorrent. It's disgusting. So,
well, and again, I think also when you're talking about, you're doing the best you can, right? By the way, just to let you know, and I'm not giving away secrets here because I don't have a subscription login for Second Vote, at least not yet. You can actually track this stuff just on thing. You can get the actual overall score. You just can't get the breakdown. Target Corporation 1.72. This is not a good score.
Exactly.
Just to let people know, it's not a good score.
Secret. It's no secret.
Not a secret.
No.
But it's you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good here, right? So there may be things that you can only get from certain places, right? Maybe you can only get a particular, maybe you only have access to banking where there's a Wells Fargo, although I kind of doubt that that's the case, but they also don't have a very good score here, but I'm just going to use them as an example. And if that's the case, if your employer does business through that, if you've got, so maybe that's one area that you can't really touch, but there's other things that you can do, and everything that you do with intention is incrementally increases the benefit of this. So you shouldn't, Rebecca, I'm sure that you're agreeing with this. You shouldn't approach this saying, if I can't run everything I do through this, maybe I shouldn't even bother to start. No. Do what you can, right?
Right. Just do what you can, do the best you can. It's small baby steps, but then look at what you're doing and see where you can improve and see where it's realistic to improve. As the economy continues to tank, I'm pretty sure there's going to be families that are like, I just need to put food on my table. I'm not going to be able to necessarily go to a store that's scored higher, but I'm not going to be able to get the groceries that I need. So every day, just do the best you can. Make the best choices you can. And that's what we advocate. And that's why we want to give this information so that they can take the information and do what they feel is best for their families. It's going to be an individual choice, and we celebrate that.
Exactly. And this is, you do it a little at a time. You start getting more and more used to being able to do those things with some sort of intentionality. Getting back to what you're talking about with small businesses, though, because I think we kind of skipped off that topic, and I want to get back to it. The reason why you want to focus your attention on small businesses as much as you can is, first off, it's healthier for your local economy. Certainly within your own community, it's healthier. Secondly, there's just simply more visibility as to where that money is going to go. And thirdly, small local businesses are not likely to be spending a whole lot of time doing a whole bunch of performative politics with whatever profit that they're making. They're much more likely to be also spending that profit locally to put food on their own tables and put their own kids through school, either homeschooling or whatever. So that's money that not only is being put to use in your community, but is visibly being put to use in your community. And you get to know the people in your community, which is also a much healthier way to enter commercial life. So there's all sorts of reasons to favor that. And Second Vote can help you do that too, I guess.
Yes, we are. And the app is going to be able to geolocate so that if you go to another next town over or out of state, you'll be able to find those local businesses as well. So, and here's the thing, when you do shop local, I have a volunteer that was telling about a story about buying a refrigerator, and she had a horrible experience with a big box seller, and she finally had to go to a local repair shop to get her refrigerator repaired. And here's, the big box don't sit next to you in church or go to, the T-ball games with you. They're not going to be able to look you in the eye, in the community and see you and have to kind of have some accountability there. But those small local community businesses, they're going to eventually run into you in the store. They're going to eventually see you. They're going to have to, contend with you.
Right.
They live with you.
Right. So there's a lot more accountability. This is true of government too, by the way. I'm a big believer in subsidiarity for the same reasons. But I mean, even if you're a liberal, maybe you want to find out where the money's going there too. Even if you're a centrist or a libertarian, maybe you and that's the reason why you actually score on a number of different topics. And if you're a subscriber to secondvote.com, to ndvote.com, you have access to those breakdowns and gives you a little bit better way to analyze what it is that you're looking at and what values you prioritize. Not just Rebecca Hatfield, who's got outstanding priorities and values. Maybe your priorities are a little different though, and this allows you to take a look at the underlying data. If you subscribe, it allows you to take a look at the underlying data.
Yes. Well, the subscription will give you what each individual score is of the 6 issues. Now, the Investor Council membership will give you the research, which is everything that went into those scores. But the subscription level will give you the 6 issue score. So, for instance, if you go and go back and look at Target, you will be able to see, if you had a subscription, which issue helped make up that composite score. Which ones were they high end, low end? Which ones were hurting them? But you would not be able to see the research behind those scores unless you had an Investor Council membership. So that's the highest level that we have right now, and that would show you all the research behind that. And basically, everything that we put into our research and to our scores, we apply it the same way to every entity. It's going to be, whether it's conservative or liberal, it's the same across the board. It's an algorithm, and we are not going to score based on how we feel about it.
Right. And the more that you go on with this, obviously, the more places that you're going to be able to score. You're going to be able to do more research, especially as more people subscribe. It's going to give you more resources to do that. I mean, I just looked up grocery as a category while we're talking here. That's how easy it is to do this, folks, at secondvote.com, to ndvote.com. You can have a conversation with somebody as sharp as Rebecca Hatfield and still take a look at the data that she's giving you. And I'm in Central Texas, so HEB, they actually have a pretty decent score, 2.97. Now, is it 5? I mean, it's not necessarily great. What's the top score in this? Is it 5?
5 is top. 5 is top, and 3 would be ideal. They're a little bit below the 3. 3 would be neutral. 3 is they're just doing their business. They're not getting involved. I think HEB does a little bit of, have some displays in their store that are less than ideal from what I've been told. I haven't been in one yet, but 3 is, we celebrate the 3s because they're just focused on doing their business, and that's wonderful. That's what we want them to do. 5 is excellent. They contribute to wonderful causes. We love what they're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. 3 is thank you for just minding your chicken. That's what you're doing.
Well, I kind of get the idea that HEB is trying to mostly mind their chickens anyway. So, but at least they're not Aldi's.
Yes. Then there's Aldi's, which is I think a sister company to Trader Joe's. So here we go.
Yeah, and Trader Joe's has got a substantially higher rating, although still below 3. But
Right.
Aldi, I just don't like the Aldi's experience anyway. It has nothing to do with their politics. People say,
really?
oh, you got to go shopping at Aldi's. I've been in there like 3 or 4 times. Like, yeah, no. This is not my experience. Not for me. Not for me. But these are the things now I can say, hey, look, it's got a bad score at second vote. That's the reason why I don't like them.
Yeah, don't go there.
Don't go there. All right. Well, Rebecca, how can people, first off, it's very easy to subscribe or donate or do both at secondvote.com.
Yes.
Is there anything else that people can do to help get the word out? You have social media campaigns going on right now?
We absolutely do. We're on many social media outlets. Anything that they're already on, look for Second Vote. And also just like, comment, and share. We have a volunteer program. Anyone that wants to get involved, we would love to have them to help with social media campaigns, to help write articles, make videos, anything they would like to do, and just give feedback on the website. Also, we encourage everyone to not only vote their values with their wallet, but also register and vote. That's something that's very important to do.
That is.
Those
and
are 3 actions that they can do. Be informed, take action at secondvote.com, and vote.
Vote, and it says it right it says it right on the front page. You've got 2 votes. The first one is at the ballot box.
Yes.
Your first vote is at the ballot box. You got to be going to the ballot box. But your second vote is with your wallet, and that's you do the ballot box 2 or 3 times a year. You should be involved in local elections. By the way, subsidiarity doesn't just apply to commerce. It doesn't just apply to government. It actually applies to your own civic engagement as well. But your second vote's with your wallet, and that's every day. And you definitely want to know that. Well, Rebecca Hatfield, I want to thank you so much for talking with us today. And again, give us the URL.
Absolutely, secondvote.com.
Secondvote.com. That's where you've got to go. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
All right, folks, stay tuned for more from the Ed Morrissey Show coming up next. Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast, and joining me right now is Deacon Steven Greydanus. He is the proprietor behind decentfilms.com. Does a lot of really great movie reviews, does a lot of other things as well. And he's here to talk to us about all that. Deacon Steven, welcome to the podcast here.
It's good to talk to you, Ed.
It's always good to talk to you. I love the credibility bookshelf that you have there. And unlike some people, it's an actual bookshelf. It's not like a Zoom picture that you're using for, the fake background.
No. These are the books that I reach around to all the time while I'm working. Whether it's I got my homily stuff is over here, and my film stuff and philosophy is over here.
Well, there you go. I mean, you've even organized it. I mean, I hate to tell you, I have a very narrow shot of my desk here. Just to the what would be to the right of the screen that you're looking at is all the mess that I've piled up, so it's out of the camera view. It's almost up to the upper bookshelves, but don't tell my wife. I'll clean it up by the time she sees this, by the way. All right. So we're here to talk about films, and we've talked on relevantradio.com, Relevant Radio on the Air, about films in the past, and it's so much fun. I'm just glad that you're here to discuss this. You've just written a review of the film Lightyear. This is off of the Toy Story franchise, and I have to lead this off by saying I am the only person in America that's never watched any of the Toy Story movies.
Not any of them.
Not any of them. It's not even by choice. It's just I never got around to it. I had grandkids, and I thought, well, at some point I'm going to pick this up. It just never came up. And so I am Toy Story deficient.
When Toy Story came out, I was 5 years out of art school, and I had taken history of animation courses as well as film history courses. I was a huge animation buff. This was in the middle of the Disney Renaissance. And so I was really excited about Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin, not so much The Lion King. But this was the year that Babe came out, and also Toy Story, the original Toy Story. And it blew me away. It was the arrival of something completely new and unprecedented. And Lightyear, it looks back to that period, but without really recapturing that sense of revolutionary change at all.
And I will tell you, I like animation. I love animation. It's odd. I've watched, I think, every other Pixar At least the Pixar releases that went into theaters. I don't think I've seen a lot of the home, the home cinema type releases, but I think this is really the only Pixar series that I've completely missed. It's I have no idea what it is. I will chalk it up to just fate, misfortune, the Holy Spirit, whatever it is. I haven't seen this thing.
Well, it's worth noting that the original Toy Story, the 1995 Toy Story film, really kind of set the tone for the era of Pixar greatness, not only artistically, but also morally. Because in sharp contrast to what was happening in American animation at the time, and the American animation scene was much more limited at the time than it became, 5 or 10 years later, it was very common for the protagonist of an animated film to be, the most righteous character, or at least the character who's adjudicated to be correct in the end. The character who gets everything that they want. You think of the Little Mermaid defying her father in order to go fall in love with a human from the surface world. And in the end, her father, gives her heart's desire. And Toy Story was really about a character who loved someone very much, but who was driven to selfish extremes, out of jealousy and out of lack of insecure. It's out of insecurity,
right?
And following Woody on his moral journey of taking selfish action toward Buzz and being rejected by his friends, and finally having to come to grips with his insecurity. That was also revolutionary at the time, and Pixar has done that in a lot of the movies that you have seen as well.
Right. And I mean, look, I have no explanation for this, but I do know that, I do know of the Toy Story universe. I know what Buzz Lightyear is in that universe. And the fact that he's getting his own film, this is, it's been a few years since the last Toy Story entry, if I recall correctly. This is this is sort of like the backstory film, right? This is the one that sets up the, it's not really a prequel as much as it is just sort of a backstory, sort of like Wolverine was for, the Marvel, for the X-Men series, that type of thing.
It's a little bit more complicated than that, because it's supposed to be not another story in the Toy Story universe, but a movie in the Toy Story universe.
Interesting.
The idea is, this is the movie that the Buzz Lightyear action figure is based on. They're calling it they're calling it Andy's favorite movie, or Andy's Star Wars. So what Star Wars was for my generation, this movie is meant to be for Andy.
Oh, that's interesting.
Now, it's an interesting idea.
Now, I've read your review, which is going to be posted shortly. It will be posted by the time this podcast comes out anyway. This is a bit of a miss for you, apparently, on how this executes on screen. That I think that the quote that you have there is that if this is Andy Star Wars, Andy had an impoverished childhood, which is it's a great line, by the way.
Thank you. I felt really bad writing that line, but that's my job. I have to be honest, and the reality is that this is a story that sets out to establish a character who's been established in the mythology of the Toy Story films as the ultimate space opera hero. He's like Luke Skywalker and Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon all rolled into one. And what we get in this story is this incredibly static kind of downbeat and really rather small tale about Buzz making a fatal mistake that strands 1,000 humans, mostly scientists and engineers, on an uninhabited planet in uncharted space, where they remain stuck for decades. And that's the movie. The movie is about Buzz trying again and again and again and again and again to get them off that planet, and just failing again and again and again. And, there's supposed to be some character development there about how he learns that you can't do everything yourself. You have to be willing to let other people shoulder the responsibility. You can't feel guilt about the mistakes that you've made in the past and let that deprive you from living your life now. You have to bloom where you're planted, and things like this, all of which is fine, but it's almost like they set out to make an anti-space opera as the origin story for Buzz Lightyear, which just makes no sense to me.
Well,
I found it very disappointing.
It doesn't make sense to me. And I mean, just as somebody who's outside of this, outside of this universe, right? Outside of the Toy Story universe, if you're setting out to explain why a child has an action figure that he considers a heroic action figure, I mean, I don't know that how you explain that by showing that he is a massive failure in the movie that is supposed to have spawned the character, the action figure that he plays with, through the other movies. I mean, that's a weird choice. It might make for a good choice for a completely new franchise, right? Some sort of, new look at a space opera, some other type of science fiction, not even necessarily franchise launch. Maybe it's just a one-off, right?
Sure.
But it's a weird backstory to explain a heroic action figure. That doesn't make any sense to me either.
What I think happens is there's this kind of recursive quality when you get too many layers deep into a mythology. We saw it happen with the Star Wars prequels. We've seen it happen with the Nouveau Looney Tunes cartoons. The original Star Wars was inspired by all kinds of things. I mentioned Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers, but there were also World War II dogfighting stories, the samurai movies of Akira Kurosawa and wuxia fiction, westerns, a lot of westerns in there. The Lord of the Rings, the Once and Future King, all of that went into Star Wars and made Star Wars great. By the time that Lucas got to doing the prequels, he was really only looking at Star Wars. And that's a much smaller world than the world that had inspired him to make Star Wars in the first place. I think you have the same thing happen with Looney Tunes, where the original Looney Tunes directors and writers and storytellers, Chuck Jones and all of those, they were looking back to the silent comedians, to Keaton and Lloyd and Chaplin. They were looking back to vaudeville. They had all kinds of things inspiring them. The Marx Brothers and you look at the later Looney Tunes, they were only looking at Looney Tunes cartoons. And I think what's happened here is you have the people who made the Toy Story movies in the first place. They're looking back to science fiction and to westerns. The last act of Toy Story 2 is a brilliant homage to the western genre. It's a really thrillingly executed, take on the sequence where the cowboys ride their horses up to a train and jump onto the train, it's done very differently.
Right.
And I think if that kind of nostalgia had gone into making this, Lightyear could have been something really powerful. As it is, it's really almost a kind of a deconstruction of what I think it should be about.
Well, and I think that's a real impulse that gets out of hand when you're, especially maybe even when you're dealing with children's entertainment. I mean, first off, I guess I got to ask, is this aimed at children, or is this aimed at deconstructing the thing for the adults who might have grown up watching this? I mean, 1995 was when Toy Story first came out, I believe. And that's, I hate to say it, it's 27 years ago. The people who were, 10 and 11 years old in 1995 are now, pushing 40. I certainly, children keep watching these. So it's not, it's not as though it was last seen in 1995. Children watched it, last year. But I mean, is this aimed at children? Is this a deconstruction for adults? What do you think the intent was for this?
I think Pixar movies have always managed to straddle that line. They make movies to entertain children, but there are also deeper adult themes. And I think that's the intention here. This is definitely a movie for kids. I saw it with my 9-year-old son. And of the two of us, he enjoyed it quite a bit more than I did. He was especially interested in the time dilation phenomenon, that when Buzz goes on these near light speed missions, he travels for 4 minutes, but 4 years pass on the planet. And so everyone he knows is rapidly aging because he keeps going on these. And Matthew had no idea that was real. And we were talking about relativity and Einstein and the Big Bang on the way home. It was a great conversation, a real good conversation starter. But something that I think Catholic parents especially, and and Christian parents will want to be aware of is 10 years after Frozen and the discussion about the maybe kind of sort of queer themes in the background and the increasingly explicit elements in Disney and other franchises. There's a very open, acknowledged lesbian relationship between Buzz's a black female commander and the woman that she marries, and they raise a son. And then most of the adventure is Buzz and his former commander's granddaughter. So that's, they're out and proud in this movie. And so that's something to be aware of.
Yeah. And it's going to turn off some, it'll turn off some parents. And I did recognize those themes in Frozen. I'll be honest with you. I think that the more you do that sort of thing, the less it becomes accessible to certain audiences. But it's a very big audience. There's a very big potential audience for all of these films, and so just as long as people understand what's in it before they get out there, and if they don't like that type of thing, they can avoid it. I love Pixar films. So you're talking about straddling the lines on these things. And I mean, I could tell you a couple of mine were Inside Out, which I thought was a brilliant film, and I mean, I had tears in my eyes as an adult watching Inside Out, because I'm recognizing all these, themes of despair and being caught up in your own cycle of emotions, and also this really very strong theme of wistfulness about lost memories and lost portions of your child. It's just a brilliant film. It's a brilliant film. And I'm sure that those things go right past the children and really touch the hearts of adults, especially, soft-hearted grandparents like myself. So,
but the kids latch on to what they can,
right?
And
exactly.
As they grow up with the films become deeper for them. I've watched my kids go through this process with these movies. I watched my son David, for instance, who's now in his 20s, go through the process of growing up with Brad Bird's The Incredibles.
Oh, yes,
and
both films.
Identifying with the superhero action and as well as the family themes, but getting to a certain point in his early teen years where he suddenly realized, the tension between Mr. and Mrs. Incredible, there are concerns about infidelity here, keeping secrets, and there's about marital struggles that had not been there, but done in a way which is completely appropriate for younger children who aren't ready to accept those themes yet.
Right. And I think maybe what you're saying here is that Lightyear misses that boat just a little bit here. Not that it's necessarily going to not work for kids, because obviously it worked for your son, but maybe the adults in the audience are going to be left scratching their heads at the end of this, wondering what the point of that was, rather than just do that sort of homage to the successful space operas like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, and even Star Trek for that matter.
It worked for my son up to a point. What he said was it was good, but not great. And he kind of hedged it when I asked him what letter grade he would give it. He said B-, C+. So
interesting. Well, you're raising a film critic. Deacon Steven, how could we be surprised by that? And so the review is up for Lightyear. Go check that out at decentfilms.com. It will be up by the time this podcast airs. And look, I'm sure, Deacon Steven, you agree with this. Don't let a reviewer scare you off of a film. If you want to go see this, the point of the review is just to alert you as to, what you can expect. And with very few exceptions, and sometimes there are a couple of exceptions, like don't ever go see this film type of reviews. And I've written a couple of those myself. For the most part, I think you'd agree with me. The review is there to inform viewers as to what to expect when they get to the theater.
Well, to inform viewers, also to model a certain way of thinking about movies. I hope that readers of my review come away with, in at least in some of the time, with insights that they might not have otherwise had, not only about a particular film, but also about ways of engaging films, about things that movies can offer or ways in which movies can go wrong that maybe they hadn't thought about before. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. I always tell people, I am not the Pope of movies. There is no Pope of movies. The Pope is not the Pope of movies. and nobody has to agree with me about any movie in the world. I hope that I offer a way of thinking about movies that's interesting and helpful. And whether you agree with me or not is a completely different question.
I agree. And still don't go see The Shape of Water. I'm sorry.
No. We could spend a whole podcast agreeing on The Shape of Water.
A film that I reviewed, I said it was so bad it was destined to win an Oscar. And it turned out to be right. All right. But we're talking about family films here. And, you know, you're talking about heartwarming family films that really touch that, you know, that family part of your heart. And of course, there's no film that better models that than The Godfather. Wait, what?
Well, it's certainly a family.
It is a family film, right?
Yes.
It's the family.
Family with a lowercase f and with a capital F.
Yes. You know, you and I had a great conversation about this on the air, and I did kind of want to come back to it because we only had a couple of minutes to go over that when we were talking on Relevant Radio. But you were talking about an alternate ending to The Godfather, and you wrote about this at decentfilms.com, which I knew about from the book. I hadn't realized that they'd filmed, or I didn't remember that they filmed it because it was actually in the saga. But it really does change the direction of at least the meaning of the film, I think, by the fact that they chose the ending that was specifically written for the theatrical release of The Godfather. And this is, of course, the famous shot of the door slowly closing on Kay as the capos are coming in to kiss Michael's hand after he's killed the heads of the 5 families and consolidated all the power in New York. Now, The Godfather there's lots of different ways you can describe The Godfather. I know that some people consider it an allegory for, you know, corporate America, I guess. I just consider it sort of an allegory for how power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think the book is actually less coherent than the movie. It's one of those rare occasions where the book is an inferior product in terms of storytelling than the movie, because the movie is just fantastic at telling this story.
Some people find it's often when the book outshines the movie, it's because of the added psychological depth of the insights that you can't get into in film. But in this case, I think you're right. I think that the book strips away a lot of unnecessary stuff and comes up with something that has a purity and a clarity beyond the novel.
Yes. And I think that part of this too is, of course, the style of the film, the way that the actors bring the characters to life. There was a certain magic to this, and the ending is actually part of that magic. Now, I'm going to let you sort of talk about what for those who haven't read the book and aren't aware of what the novel ending was. It's an interesting thing to consider because it would have made the movie, perhaps ironically, maybe a little bit more Catholic with the original novel ending, which they did shoot.
This I was very happy when I learned about this, because it offered me a way into a movie that I have to confess to you has been intimidating me for 20 years. As a film critic, The Godfather is one of those movies that you have to tackle, but this is when a movie has been this revered for this long, it can be very difficult to find your way into talking about it. And I wanted to talk about the Catholic themes in the movie, and obviously the place to start with that is the famous baptism massacre sequence. And I wanted to talk about Coppola's Catholicism and what he brought to it in the way of perspective as a filmmaker. But it wasn't until I discovered the alternate ending and the theological significance that it casts on the ending that he actually chose that I really found my way into the story. So what Mario Puzo wrote in the novel is a sequence in which Michael's wife, Kay, after realizing that her husband is in fact the new Don Corleone, that he is the new head of the Corleone crime family, we see her in the Catholic Church with Michael's mother, Vito's widow, and they're praying and lighting candles. And so Kay has taken her place in a long line of mob women whose husbands do terrible things behind closed doors. But this is Vito's ethic. He does terrible things behind closed doors, but he also believes that a man who is not there for his family can never be a true man. So he opens the office door, he comes out, and he does this throughout the whole grand opening sequence. It's Connie's wedding, his daughter's wedding. The movie starts in the office, in that closed office, where as the father of the bride, he can't refuse anyone who comes to him with a request. It's a Sicilian tradition.
Right.
But he doesn't stay in the office. He goes to take family pictures. He doesn't want to take the picture unless Michael is there. He goes in and out. And this is crucial for Vito. It's his self-image. It's his identity. He believes that he can be a good man by being there for his family and then still do the things that he does as a mob boss behind closed doors. And this compartmentalization is really an illusion. It's fundamentally a lie. And we see his failure as we realize, what happens. None of his children turn out well.
Right.
All of them end badly. So he hasn't been the family man. He hasn't been the father that he thinks he has. And the only reason he has that illusion is that he dies, while he's still in a position where his whole family comes together to mourn him. And
he's playing with his grandson.
Yeah, it's the idyllic death. He couldn't have asked for a happier death on his own presuppositions. Right. But you see very quickly that Michael is not able to carry on that tradition. And part of the reason, and this for me is the significance of the fact that they chose that alternate ending. Kay is Michael's second wife. His first wife, who was a good Sicilian girl, would have been the perfect mob boss. She would have joined Michael's mother in praying in church and not asked too many questions and been obedient and submissive and quiet and raised him a nice Italian family. And Kay, who was a New England wasp, was not about to do that. And so for her, it's much more significant when she finds herself on the outside of this office door and the door is closing on her. And that's the moment that we realize it's not just closing her out, it's closing Michael in. It's closing him in from his family, isolating him from his family. He will not be that good father in the mode, even to the extent that his own father was able to do. And that's why his marriage falls apart. That's why, we see that in the end, he winds up even murdering his own brother. The whole moral system that his father bequeathed to him completely falls apart.
Because it has to. Because of its internal contradictions.
Absolutely.
And this brings me to something else, and it occurred to me, but we didn't have enough time to pursue it when I was talking to you on Relevant Radio, which is that there's quite the same structure going on in The Sopranos. Now, I love The Sopranos. I watched it from beginning to end. In fact, I own all. What is it, 6.2 seasons or something? Because that last season was a 6th season part 1 and 6th season part 2, rather than calling it a 7th season. But it's the same dynamic. Now, it doesn't have the same call outs to Catholicism, although there's certainly religious figures in there. First couple seasons, the local priest who has a sort of a crush on Carmela and all that kind of stuff. But the whole structure of The Sopranos is that Tony's a mob boss who's in therapy, right? And his therapy continues from the first episode to the last episode. And he is trying to deal with the conundrum of exactly what you're talking about in The Godfather, which is that he is compartmentalizing his life as a mob boss and as a family man. And he is trying to move back and forth through that office door, if you will. And he has this illusion of himself as a family man first and a mob boss last. And this goes on for quite a while. And it's a tremendously entertaining series. There's all sorts of different plots, all sorts of different subtexts to keep you entertained. But this is the main structure of the series. And at the very end, you have the series finale, I should say, not season finale, but the series finale that people really puzzled through, right? This whole don't stop believing sequence at the diner and the sudden blackout. And it comes, and I mean, I've argued this now for however long it's been since the series ended. It comes right after his doctor refuses to treat him any longer. They have a falling out and she refuses to treat him any longer. And to me, what that final blackout was the end of that compartmentalization, his realization that what he is actually just a mob boss. He's a terrible person, and his family life is not going to save him. He's just a terrible person. And it takes 7 seasons to get to that. But I think it's the same structure. And it's one of the reasons why I think both the Godfather series, or at least 1 and 2, and The Sopranos are so compelling, is because as Christians, as Catholics, we tend to compartmentalize our sins as well. It's very difficult for us to integrate our fallen nature into who and what we are, because we want to put that aside. Well, that's not who I really am. Who I really am is this really great guy over here, without accounting for the things that you do in the fallen world. And I think that that's really one of the reasons why we find that type of thing so compelling.
You just used a really important word, integrate, which relates to the virtue of integrity. And I think integrity is one of the least appreciated virtues because we water it down to a synonym for honesty or reliability or something like that. But when you think of integrity in its non-moral meanings, the senses that you hear it used in engineering or medicine, structural integrity or skin integrity, integrity is that property in a complex reality which binds it together into a stable, cohesive whole. And when you look at anyone's life is a complicated reality. We all have different social selves. We exist in different social situations. We talk to different people who call forth different things from us. My children have often commented that they can tell who I'm talking to on the phone by what voice I'm using. And it's not something I do consciously.
Right.
But we code switch. We are, our siblings elicit something from us, friends at church, something else. And that's not necessarily dishonest or morally problematic, as long as all of our different social selves have a fundamental underlying moral reality. If there's a moral cohesion among them. The problem comes when we give ourselves permission to do things in certain settings that you wouldn't do in another situation. And you become a different moral person. And you see that pattern playing out in the lives of super predators, of people like Theodore McCarrick and Bill Cosby,
right.
And people who know them well and attest, no, this is a good, caring person. They would never do anything like that. And I don't think that they're faking. I don't think that that's not true. It's just that, in this situation, somebody like Bill Cosby becomes a genuinely caring, empathic, generous, human being, and then in another situation he becomes a complete monster because of that lack of integrity, that binding force.
Integration, the lack of integration.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that you see this throughout the Godfather saga. You see it throughout the Sopranos saga as well, and you see it not just in Tony Soprano too. You also see it in Carmela. You see it in the kids to some extent as well. Because the kids realize what dad does for a living and they start compartmentalizing. And so it is really I think a metaphor for a very fallen world. So I honestly think when we start discussing this, the Godfather, the Sopranos, that moral structure is really, I think, what calls, there's two things I think that really call to us in entertainment. One is moral structures. The other one is redemption. And what's really interesting about The Godfather is you don't really see a lot of redemption. You see, if you stick around for the entirety of Godfather 3, good luck to you, by the way. But if you do, you see Michael Corleone trying to get to redemption and completely failing because he hasn't recognized that he's an awful person yet. And he goes through the whole act of confession.
I think he's realized that he's an awful person. I don't think he knows what to do about it.
Yeah, I mean, you see that whole scene where he's not really in confession, but he's confessing to the cardinal, who later supposedly becomes, Pope John Paul I, that he murdered his brother, right? And what does the cardinal say to him in that? And again, I mean, this is Godfather 3, and a lot of people are going to say, you don't need to talk about Godfather 3, but I think it's an important moment. And he says,
it's absolutely an important moment.
He says, I don't sense repentance in you, so I can't give you absolution. But
he does absolve him, but it's this ambiguous thing. It's an ambivalent thing because he says, your sins are terrible. Change is possible, but you don't believe that, and so you're not going to change.
Right.
But nevertheless, in spite of that, he does give.
Oh, that's right. Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. He does.
Yeah. He's hoping that he's wrong, but he's not wrong.
And what happens in the end is he reverts right back to all the terrible things that is the structure of his life. Anyway.
Something that I threw out at the end of our talk on Relevant Radio, and I'm just going to throw it out here again, is the significance of that closed door at the end of The Godfather. Yep. I think there's a beautiful commentary on it at the end of another film by a filmmaker who has interacted with Coppola throughout his career, Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, which is another. It's an epic gangster story that follows a gangster throughout his whole life from the time that he's a young man until the time when he's in a retirement home. And he goes through that same process of coming to realize that he was never a good father, that nobody wants to have anything to do with him. There's no one in his life that he can turn to. All of his stories about the old days, they exist only in his own head. What you realize in the last half hour of The Irishman is this whole exciting story has been inside our protagonist's head, and that the inside of his head is a very lonely place. And he's got this whole thing about burial, and it just seems so final to him. He doesn't want to be buried. He doesn't want that door to be closed. It feels to him like the closing of the door of hell. He wants to be in a mausoleum. He wants to be, at least then there's a building. It's there. It doesn't feel as final to him. And he walks through these attempted confessions with a priest, but just like Michael Corleone, he doesn't feel sorry. He almost wishes that he does, but he doesn't know how to. He doesn't know how to feel sorry, but he wants. And he begs the priest in the last moments of the film. He says to him, just leave the door open. I don't like you to close the door. Leave it open a little bit. He doesn't know how to reach out for God. He doesn't know how to reach out for his family. He knows his family's not coming. Part of him maybe wants at least to leave the door open for God. And that to me is the antithesis of what happens in that last shot of The Godfather. The door closes. This is, it's not necessarily Michael's damnation for all time, but this is the door closing to hell. And the door, as C.S. Lewis says, the door to hell is locked from the inside.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, we're really out of time here, but you can read more from Deacon Steven Greydanus at decentfilms.com. And are you on Twitter at Decent Films or?
Yes.
Yeah, at Decent Films. Okay. So I had that right. Okay. You can do that. Where else can people follow you?
I'm also at Facebook, both under my name, and also I have a Decent Films fan page.
Excellent. Well, go sign up for his fan page too, folks. And be sure to keep watching that space at decentfilms.com for the latest in film reviews, very much oriented to alerting parents as to what may or may not be appropriate in the films that he's reviewing. So be sure to take special care for that if you are concerned about that for you and your children. Deacon Steven Greydanus, thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Thank you, Ed. It's been a blast.
When we come back, we'll have more from the Ed Morrissey Show, so stick around. Thanks for tuning in to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast edition. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe at each of the different platforms. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Rumble, we're on YouTube, and we're at the Town Hall Media Player. So be sure to subscribe. Subscriptions are important. Really do appreciate that. It's free. Be sure to like the video if you like that as well. We want to get the word out as much as we possibly can. Really want to thank you for being with us. And while you're at it, if you're at any one of the Town Hall websites, especially hotair.com, be sure to subscribe to our VIP program or our VIP Gold program, which has extra benefits for our subscribers. That is a paid subscription service, but that money goes to fund important initiatives such as Julio Rosas's on-the-road journalism, first-person journalism, journalism you can trust from the border, from the unrest in cities, and all other sorts of things. We do all sorts of fun things with our VIP Gold subscription members, including our VIP Gold chat that I do with Cam Edwards on Wednesday afternoons. Cam Edwards from bearingarms.com. Each of our sites have their own live chat editions and their own streaming shows for VIP Gold members. So be sure to subscribe to the Hot Air VIP Gold, which goes across the entire Town Hall media spectrum, and especially to the Ed Morrissey Show podcasts. We really appreciate it. Thank you for watching.